So, yes, my name is Lennie, and I'm really pleased to be here today with Ellen. One of the things I just realized, too, is our names they're all both mean light. Lennie, Lenore, and Ellen. It all comes from Helen, and we are light.
And a nice assonance as well, which is fitting.
Yeah. So, you have come to this place because Poet in the City commissioned 3 poets, as we've already heard tonight, 3 poets to write poems on this subject and to explore feminism. And they did it really in an interesting way through workshops and collaboration with communities. And there were 3 poets. One of them was Degna Stone, the other was Skye Hawkins, and the third is Ellen, who's here today, and the other 2 can't make it, sadly. But their work has been central to the project too, and I just want to tell you a tiny bit about the other 2 poets. Skye Hawkins, her poetry considered women's bodies, and it was inspired by the archive of Spare Rib and Newcastle's Slovak community. And Degna Stone, her work was inspired by the artists of color in the unfinished business. That was the exhibition at the British Library, and she worked with the Children's Society in Newcastle Treatment, Recovery, and the Fenham Walking for Health. Ellen, who's here tonight, is poet, spoken word artist, and your work for this project was inspired by themes of protest. And you worked with the Tyneside Women's Health in Biker, where your ancestors are from. So, because it is about poetry, before I let Ellen speak about where it comes from, I asked her if she could give us a poem. Thank you so much. I had a private preview of that poem. It only had me in tears almost when we were talking beforehand. It's amazing. So tell us about the work with I'm very interested to know, how you get these poems, how you work with the communities, because you're a community worker as well as a poet, aren't you? So how did you work with the Tyneside Women's Health Group?
Well, I went in there as an activist, as a community organiser, with a lot of experience around protest, and really pushed that aside to allow for a more authentic conversation. I was very conscious that I didn't want to go in there with an idea and make it happen. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to just go in there and say, oh, great, you like this, and I'm going to stick with that, and I'm going to pull that thread. I wanted it to be a broader tapestry of ideas of women with different experiences to mine. And the way that I did that was through discussion. We started talking about what the rules are for women. We talked about what we would demand if we were to protest those rules, because you can't have an effective protest without a demand. It's just screaming into the void if you don't do that. And then we also we chatted about the examples that they had in their lives of when they'd broken those rules. I ended up with this big long list, and it was the easiest poem to write because it just made it rhyme.
Oh, okay. We're all just going to go away and do stuff like that, aren't we? Just make rhymes. But so tell me a little bit more about where the poems actually come from. So, because it's not verbatim, isn't it? You're not doing, some people do that kind of theater, don't they, where they listen to somebody's activities or experiences and then translate it into a play or a poem even. But you've not done that, have you?
No, that poem is the closest that I came to that. And it's really hard to explain how you sort of sift through people's experiences, find meaning in it from your own life, and then turn it into a piece of art. It's quite an intuitive process, quite a magical process that actually I think involves connection to society. It requires looking deep into someone's eyes and being honest with them, and then having that returned, and then using that honesty to produce heartfelt truths through art. That's a long and rambling way of saying I don't really know how it works. But isn't that good that we don't know how it works, because it's unique and interesting, it's about connection.
And what, so you read the poems back to the women,
Yes.
and what
Wow.
was that like?
Wow, that was like one of the greatest moments of my life, honestly. So because I was there January 2019, the amount that had changed since those poems were written was incredible. Like, we were all, rather than sitting around a table, we were all at our own individual desks with glass in between us. And you know, those women were still accessing that project, so essential that they were still accessing that project despite all of the changes in the world and in their lives. And knowing that that project was still there and still going was just so important, because domestic violence and domestic abuse has just increased drastically because of COVID. It's just gone crazy. So I was really pleased that I could go back there and speak to them. And they just got it. They were so honoured to have hear their words rhyme. I think there's something really nice about hearing something rhyme that you believe. As simple as that, really. And I don't write a lot of rhyming poetry anymore, but I think that actually rhyme is like really connecting people in society. There's something ancestral about that. Like, it's like a dance with words.
It's like music, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why did you take this on when Poet in the City came to you and said, would you go into did you get to choose the community you went into?
I worked with a community liaison person to find the group, and it just kind of all fell into place after that.
And so why did you say yes?
Because...
Was she forced?
Because I was so new to writing, and I had only ever really written for myself. I think with slam poetry, like, you write about these really big issues, and that's like what the ultimate slam poem has got. You know, everyone's crying, everyone's laughing, everyone's angry, everyone's moved in so many different ways, but it's always like, it's like in this kind of little bubble, and I kind of wanted to break out that bubble and write with and for other people rather than just me.
And one of the things you said when we were talking beforehand, we were talking about poetry and we were talking about feminism, and you had this lovely line, which is that feminism is a language.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit more? Think about that again.
Think about the nature of language, always changing. People have to trace things back to really understand where it came from. People speak in different dialects. Not everyone understands each other. People use words that other people don't understand. Everyone's different. Sometimes we need translation. And I think that within feminism, that translation tool is understanding and respect. Respect that not everyone agrees with you. And I think we move and morph with language, and language shapes us. And I think feminism is like a bigger entity. It's like almost like an external thing sometimes that shapes people as well, especially online. So yeah, I think it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, talk a bit more about that, about the metaphor. Because it can be a metaphor for dissent. It can be. It can also be a way of connecting. I'm interested in how you are shaping the language, both with the idea of the women's voices that you want to portray, but also you have an idea yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and it's like a kind of mutual morphic relationship that kind of you're moving and you're changing, and I'm influenced by the women who are talking to me about these ideas, and then I'm performing to them, and then I'm giving them a sense of myself. I'm giving them a piece of myself. I'm like sacrificing a piece of myself for them, and they're doing the same back for me in the poetry. Like, I think the final piece in my commission, I go into quite a deep place about my family, my history, and where I came from as a person. And I use a metaphor that they handed to me in one of those sessions. And it's about weaving and sewing and mending, repairing, and yeah.
We're going to hear that, but not just
Okay.
yet. Not just yet. But I wanted you to say again a little bit more about where you had come from. So, because you said where you were working was actually from where your ancestors were.
Some of them,
So,
yeah, some of them.
so that must have felt a very good thing to connect again to.
Yep. Again, and there's that kind of magical ancestral thing that can't be put into words, where sometimes you find yourself in the right place in life because you are. If you honor where you've come from, you find yourself in the right place. And I actually, lived in the East End of Newcastle and spent a lot of time thinking about what it was like for the women in my family who lived there previously, who did a lot of unpaid labour, who were probably working as hard as the men, but often just not paid at all, actually, in quite really difficult conditions in large Catholic families that didn't have heating or adequate food, and that, like, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and how lucky, how privileged I am, but really walking those streets and finding all the little bits of the East End where the cobbles are sort of poking out on the road, and kind of just thinking, like, what must it have been like for them? Yeah.
And so poetry picks up, it obviously, it literally picks up from the cobblestones,
Yes.
isn't it? And from the blood and the sweat. But also, so it's a place of memory, isn't it? It's You're doing both things, memorializing, I suppose, in one way, but also giving new possibilities.
Yeah, it's like a circle, though, isn't it? It's a loop. It's a thread tied.
And do you think I'm very interested in the kind of poetry that you draw from something like going into a community group, which would you call that sort of poetry of testimony, of experience or something? I mean, do you think there's a sort of hierarchy of poetry?
No.
I knew you were going to say that.
Of course
Why?
not.
Okay, defend your position.
Well, it's like saying there's a hierarchy of language, or, I mean, really taste, and it's like class, and I'm not down with it. If you like what you like, I don't care. Enjoy words in as many different guises as you possibly can. Like, same with film and TV. It's like whatever you like.
No, I'm agreeing with you there.
Yeah.
And this started with the unfinished business, didn't it, at the British Library? And so you went to the British Library, and what did you see? what meant things to you?
Well, what I loved about it was the texture of it, the material of it. I felt like, because I saw some objects in early 2020, late 2019. Can't remember. And then, like a million years ago, isn't it, that time?
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it after, like, in that kind of summer period where we were allowed outside. And I think a lot of people have had this experience. It's like the pandemic was really heady, and words are very heady. Mm-hmm. We're like up here, we're thinking, they're like, yeah. And the exhibition was good because it was really down to earth. There was a lot of physical objects, books, paper, banners, posters, and that just meaty material. I was like, no, I need to do that. And so that's why I've created what I've created with my work, because I wanted it to be like an earthly experience.
And objects are very important to you. It's interesting. We've just seen the posters, which obviously speak volumes, don't they? And you're also working on something called the Protest Library. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So Protest Library features a lot of Penny's incredible posters, other objects as well. And what I've tried to do is use the material culture of protest as trigger points for the poetry to explore different ideas about protest. And I've had some incredible donations to the protest library, and I've curated them in a promenade space, and I will take people through that promenade space and talk and perform poetry as I go.
And the posters and the poems in
Yes.
both,
Yes.
is that what the protest library is? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, there's posters, there's poetry, there's items of clothing, there's an incredible sculpture made out of fabric, there's, what else have we got? Loads of stuff, it's great. The material culture of protest, that's what I'm calling it.
So I think that's a good time to go to our poem, our last poem, to finish. And it very much comes out of what you're talking about, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's called Fabric Hands. Ellen Wilkinson must have had fabric hands. Thread, fingertips, pincushion palms and wrists releasing silk banners scrawled with demands. With each word she wove workmen's minds, embroidered closed down shipyards, blanketed the workhouse without walls, wrapped, malnourished in patchworked cotton. Women and war kept the yards open. Shipbuilders' uniforms split, frayed edges of thick melting wool screeched when caught on scraps of steel. So it was lucky that my grandma too had fabric hands. Felted tough fabrics to withstand North Sea spray, repaired donkey jackets with nimble loops, used pianists' fingers to knit hats and scarves, pilled patterns from magazines to adorn children in 1960s lace trims. When I fell and broke my skin, my mother buttoned it back up. Her hand cream softness silked over exposed tissue, caressed my baby cheeks as I reached for the cared-for cuticles on her fabric hands. My tiny digits grasped at hers. She unthimbled me, showed me the supple potential of loose strands. Fingers like cords clutching spoons and pens fluttered at home and at work, decorating and designing templates to help my hands become more elastic. She handed me a thread that I followed down to the river. I found women there, holding each other up with their fabric hands, mending broken bones and brains with pinpoint accuracy, meshing together stories and problems by binding with zigzag lines their love and anger, knotting chunks of nylon fear and mohair hope to entwine tightly a net of women's work. I'll plait myself inside it, anchor myself in with a piece of string, let my ribboned hair merge with the wind, and when I walk, I'll be pulled by crocheted waves made by women before me. I'll fold into them, because I wear a dress made of fabric hands.